Welcome to our Bloomberg Television and radio audiences worldwide. In Washington, D.C., one of the central players in global AI infrastructure build-out is speaking to and about its most important and biggest customer, that is Dell, and the United States federal government. Delighted to say that Dell Technologies Chairman and CEO Michael Dell joins us alongside the Department of Energy Undersecretary for Science, Dr. Darío Gil. And Michael, a lot of the themes that you're trying to get across, and I don't know what conclusions you've reached in the last hour with your colleague sat next to you, is that either government is getting it right in the United States or they're not, in where they're allocating resource, where they're deploying policy to build critical national AI infrastructure. What are the conclusions you've reached today?
You know, we're seeing in government a number of the projects advance from the pilot phase to production phase. And certainly, you know, Darío can speak to the ambitious initiatives, but, you know, we have built a platform for open, scalable systems to enable all the great science that's occurring in the national labs and beyond. Certainly, we have a fabulous example in the Doudna cluster that we're beginning to deploy. And all of this is about accelerating science, scientific discovery and progress. And certainly, you know, that's a huge priority. So great to be here with our largest customer, and you know, we're very mission focused and making sure our solutions are enabling the mission wherever it occurs, whether that's in space, you know, out in the field, and everywhere else.
Dr. Gil, there are case studies, right? We could talk, for example, about the progress you've made with NERSC, but zooming out for a moment, if you will, from the DOE's perspective, why is AI infrastructure now such a core part of national security and energy security implications?
Well, because we're in the midst of a computing revolution, and AI is at the heart of that revolution, and it is going to transform how science and engineering are practiced in our nation. The Monday before Thanksgiving, President Trump signed an executive order to launch the Genesis mission, and within that mission, we seek to harness this computing revolution to double the productivity and impact of America's $1 trillion a year R&D ecosystem. And science and engineering are at the heart of our progress and capabilities in national security, in discovery science, in energy, in health. And the example of the partnership that we have with the Doudna system in NERSC, in one of our 17 national laboratories, exemplifies the power of using AI to accelerate science.
Dr. Gil, is Dell and Mr. Dell sat next to you delivering supercomputers to the timeline you'd expect?
Yes, so for example, in that system that we're standing up, we already have an early access program where we stood up the first generation of nodes of the NVIDIA GPUs. System is going to be operational for the science community mid-2027. So I think one of the characteristics we're seeing right now is that we used to have supercomputing projects that would take a decade to build. Now we're building these things in 2 years. And that's a big change in terms of the velocity with which it's moving.
And one of the things that the government is doing is sorry I had to interrupt there.
No, please carry on.
Leveraging the integrated, you know, rack scalable systems that we're building for commercial and enterprise. And obviously there are enormous build outs in AI data centers, as you're well aware, Ed. And so, you know, kind of, again, leveraging that open scalable architecture that we built will accelerate the government's progress in all of its AI infrastructure requirements.
We're live on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio around the world. We're speaking to Michael Dell and Department of Energy Undersecretary for Science, Dr. Darío Gil. Michael, the Pentagon recently designated Anthropic as a potential supply chain risk. Your assessment of that decision and the scenario that's playing out there, please.
You know, I try not to assess that decision. You know, I think I think we're kind of a foundational provider of the infrastructure. What I can say from our standpoint is obviously we have various controls and systems to make sure we're selling to the right, to the authorized users. But I don't think a company can dictate to a sovereign government what it does with its tools. I just don't think that's a workable model.
Dr. Gil, I asked that question because right now, your department, every department, has to balance what are national security concerns and interests with very real cyber threats to U.S. infrastructure. How do you do that? Keep working with private enterprise American companies, but also achieve the goals that this administration wants to in this period?
So look, if you look at cyber threats and the overall security posture on these technologies, and being very aware that our adversaries do not, wish us well, the way you approach it is to, from day one, build a culture and a technical architecture where cybersecurity and security overall are an integral part of everything that we're building, right, from day one. So this is not something that is an afterthought where you're building an architecture or implementing these systems. And frankly, one of the things, for example, that we're seeing that is an evolution is that AI-driven cyber attacks are increasing in its power, and the only way we're going to be able to defend it is with AI-driven cyber defenses. So, for example, categories like red teaming and blue teaming, what I am seeing now from our teams is that you're seeing those automated, and you're seeing a red team and a blue team that is driven by AI agents attacking and defending each other, and then that informs the overall sort of like cyber architecture that we've implemented. So this is one of the defining challenges in the deployment of technology, the overall cyber posture.
Michael, there's great demand to understand what's happening in global supply chains right now, particularly with, it's not necessarily delays in specific data centers, but shifting priorities, where a data center needs to go first geographically. What are you seeing right now on particular bottlenecks, or where, from a CapEx deployment standpoint, the priority really is?
Well, certainly, as we've talked about in our latest earnings, the demand is ahead of the supply, and the constraints are the ones that we all know about. It's memory silicon, it's advanced node semiconductors, and power, and the infrastructure to build out the power. Those are definitely all constrained to one degree or another. The good news is we're responding to the challenge, and we have an incredible supply chain, and we're able to provide an enormous amount of this to our customers because we've got our arms around a lot of supply, and a supply chain that is globally distributed, resilient, and works well, maybe even better when there are challenges.
Undersecretary, with the war in Iran, there is a focus on energy prices, on oil. Is there anything to extrapolate out from that longer term on your departments and this country's ability to secure energy supply for the data center capacity that is being built?
Energy is an absolute top priority for the administration, for President Trump, for Secretary Wright. And energy is the other side of the coin of the AI computing revolution. So we need a world of more energy and more abundant energy and secure energy systems. But look, there is no way for us to deliver on the ambitions that we have as a country for AI and for additional technologies and the reindustrialization of America without a growing energy and affordable energy supply. So this is absolute top priority. And I give as an example, we're talking about oil and gas, but also in the horizon is a renaissance of nuclear power that we're very driven. If you look at even beyond is our commitment and our investments towards realizing fusion energy. So we need to invest across all the different horizons to realize the full potential of America.